successful tech companies really started and were getting success before they really got into the formal venture funding process. This is true of Facebook, Yahoo, even Microsoft to some extent. These companies all started organically and started functioning as businesses, and then when they needed to grow, they got money. So what I like to tell entrepreneurs is that, yes, you're going to need funding, but if you think like, okay, fund me and then I'm going to start working, that may not be the right approach. You should start working right away. Start figuring out what you want to do, or even try and make money right away. I think that a lot of technology ventures go into business, and it's a little confusing to people who are used to regular businesses. Most technology ventures lose money, just lose, and then they go public or somebody acquires them for the patents and the technology. But they're running a money-losing business, which is fine, but the problem is if you keep running out of money, you have to go running back to investors, and it's a very stressful experience. So if you can avoid that, if you can figure out how to make a money-making business earlier on, it seems kind of obvious, but if you've hung around like Silicon Valley companies, they basically lose money. It's called burning cash. They have what's called a burn rate. How much cash are they burning every month, and how long can they last? It's just that what's funny, if you look at some of the biggest success stories, they haven't started like that.
Now, Hugh, from your experience and seeing a lot of business startups, if you had to start a business today, what area would you move into?
Okay, that's a great question because I have kind of a funny answer for that. In technology, the category, when you say what type of business, the category that you're in is constantly shifting. And what I like to joke about it is to say, if you can explain exactly what you want to do, you're too late. If you can say with certainty that this product will sell to this kind of customer, you're probably too late because most successful technology ventures are working ahead of where the market is. And that's good news and bad news. The good news is if you're right, you can pick up a huge amount of momentum in a changing market. If you're wrong, you're in the wrong place. But I'll give you an example. I'll just kind of give a simple example. Let's say that you are really, based on the success of the iPhone, you're really convinced that a flat touchscreen mobile phone is going to be successful, right? So you're going to develop a flat touchscreen mobile phone. Well, you're 7 years late. The market has proven that is a good product, and big companies have already moved in and taken over that market. If you want to try it, go ahead, but it's going to be tough. You understand? So it's this idea too. Okay, I'm going to do a social mobile app. That could be great, but you're coming in. The market has shown that that's a good idea. Therefore, 500 people have already gone there before you, and you're going to be coming in late. Now, the difficulty is that you have to go ahead of the market, and I'll just make up a silly example. So you think the market is, let's say you think the market for apps that deal with music are not as good. There could be a better one to help, make up your favorite song or something. So you're going to develop that because the market hasn't discovered that yet. So you're going to develop that. Then you have to see if people want it. Now, if people want it, you're going to get a big hit. If people don't want it, you're going to strike out. But do you see the issue there? If you can get ahead of where people are, you can be alone because the success comes from being distinct, differentiated. If you go, what investors like to ask entrepreneurs is, what is your unique value proposition in the market? What's special about you? And it can be a difficult question to answer. And sometimes, as I mentioned before, it's simply you're the special thing about the venture. Some very big Silicon Valley ventures get funded because somebody who's been successful previously walks in and says, "Hi, I'm Mr. Big. You know me, fund me in my new venture." So they're like, "Well, it's him or her. It must be a good idea." But you're sort of shooting at a moving target in a category, and that's where it comes back to yourself. What do you know about? What are you good at? And so an example would be deciding what venture to go into has a lot to do with who you are and your experience. So, and this is also a mistake that people make. So, for example, let's say you have experience in real estate. Well, it would make sense that you would have knowledge and experience to start a technology venture that had to do with the real estate business. The mistake that people make is that someone says, well, I have a lot of success in real estate, therefore I'm going to start a technology company in the cooking and restaurant industry. I'll be successful at that because I was successful in real estate. Not necessarily. If you think like an investor, you're like, well, I'd rather back the person who's going to bring 20 years experience in their particular field to the venture. And that's where, and this is one of these things where there's always examples of people who are successful in fields that were not their own, of course. Of course there's examples of that, but if you think of sort of logically, what are you going to be good at, then it's something that you already know. That would be my approach.
Now, in starting up a business, in a startup, whether it be technology or whatever business you decide to start up, how important is creativity?
I think creativity is absolutely paramount because, as I was saying, in the lean startup model, you're starting with an idea and then you're going to constantly change it over time. It's a creative process. And I come at it, my background, before I worked in tech, I worked in television, doing script development. So I have an experience, my background is kind of like playing around with story ideas and figuring out storylines and casting of actors. And so I've always come at entrepreneurial ideas as if they were movies. How are we going to rewrite this script? What kind of character can we have? And because the process of putting on a TV show or a movie is very similar to doing a startup. And in fact, a movie is sort of a startup venture. It's a new entity, a business venture. So you have to have a mind that's open to new ideas. And what's funny, though, is it's really a balancing act because, and I think what you might be hearing in a lot of this discussion is there are tensions in entrepreneurship between different kinds of thinking, because entrepreneurs have to be committed to success and committed to what they want to do. They have to believe in it, because if they don't, they're never going to get anywhere. At the same time, they have to be open to changing their mind. So there's a tension. So you can be, if you're like, okay, I'll change my mind every 5 minutes because that's what the market wants, you may have a problem. You might not be consistent or persistent enough. But if you're just sitting there saying, I believe that this is going to work no matter what, and I'm not going to accept any negative feedback no matter what, you'll probably fail. So do you see the tension there? You have to kind of manage it, and that's where the team comes in. Sometimes a group of people that can speak honestly to each other can really make a successful venture because they can disagree with each other or they can think about stuff. And if the personalities mesh, then you can have a great thing. Now, of course, I'll give you a great counterexample just to prove myself wrong, but to demonstrate what I'm talking about. Stephen Jobs of Apple, I never met the man, but my understanding is he was extremely adamant that his ideas were correct. In fact, he didn't believe in market research. My understanding is that he said, I don't want the customer to tell me what they want. I'm going to tell the customer what they want. And it's like Henry Ford once said something similar. Henry Ford said, if I asked my customers what they wanted, they would tell me they wanted faster horses.
Wow.
So now, of course, here's the fallacy, and this is like entrepreneurship. The field is dominated by large personalities. That doesn't mean that you have to have a large personality to be a successful entrepreneur. You don't have to be Steve Jobs, and the truth is most of us are not. He was a genius. He was also, from what I understand, not a nice person. So he had a combination. He had incredible ideas, and he was brutal enough to make them real. Now, if you have that combination of things in yourself, go for it, right? But I think most of us are not really like that. Most of us need a little more interaction with people, a little more feedback from the market. So you have to be right for you.
Hugh, the name of this program is called What's in Your Hand. Mm-hmm. When you hear that term, what's in your hand, what becomes present for you?
Well, I think it's very descriptive of the entrepreneurial scenario, because the market reacts to what you've done, what you've created, what's in your hand. You can sit around and talk about ideas all day. If we have to make something, it could be a digital or not, doesn't really exist in physical form, but it has to be real. You have to have something to offer, a product or a service that people can see or understand, and then they're going to figure out if they're going to buy it or sign up for it. So I think that ultimately the test of an entrepreneurial venture is that initial product. And I will tell you also, having done a lot of marketing over the last 15, 20 years, is that the product itself is, and this sounds really obvious, but it gets missed a lot, is the most important aspect of a technology venture. And I always like to tell my clients, or when I worked in big companies, I would tell my internal clients, like the boss, I would say, I can't market that far out from where the product actually is. Meaning that, okay, I'm a marketing guy, I can fudge things a little bit, or I can make things sound good when they're not. But if they aren't good, I can't make that problem go away. And I'm not going to mention any names, but I've worked for some pretty big companies, and big companies often have problematic products. And it's like, what's the actual product do? How does it function? Is there a problem with it? Are you going to fix that problem? There's and this is also just one of those things where when you talk about the venture integration, when a company gets acquired by a large company, sometimes there's a difficulty in understanding of how does a large company address problems versus how does a small company. Sometimes a big company can be slow, or at the same time, the big company can be much more serious about addressing problems. But that's how when you say what's in your hand, that's how I would respond to it. I'd also say that when you're presenting an idea to backers, people who might invest in your venture, what you're offering, what's in your hand is your investor pitch, your business plan, whatever, your idea. You have to make a really good showing of it. That's the other aspect of what's in your hand for entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm. I am hosting an event on June 29th, and it's going to be an event. It's going to be a motivational event. We're going to be talking about success. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurship. We're going to be celebrating. We're going to have food, and there's going to be workshops, live workshops here at the radio station. How do you see that as a product?
Well, sounds great. I think that getting together and getting the chemistry of people being together in a live event can be great. I think in the current era where people get very distracted by online interactions and stuff, a focused physical event can be a great way to get people to think about what they want to do and make connections. And in New York, there's a lot of activity in technology entrepreneurship. Companies getting together, hiring, ventures that need help. People coming together to put ideas together, and there's a whole community in New York City. Its nickname is Silicon Alley. And I don't think it's any particular place in New York. I don't know. Maybe the hip companies are down in Chelsea or something. But it's part of a community, and if you can tap into that, it's great.
Yeah. Well, we're actually going to be live on the radio as well as people coming in live and doing their workshops here. I'll be doing interviews over the radio, so it's going to be shared with the people that are here live in the studio and people that are listening and people over the internet. So I think it's going to be pretty powerful.
Yeah, sounds great.
Yeah. So I'm excited about that. June 29th, many powerful workshops, powerful networking, and like you said, bringing these people together and trying to create some kind of chemistry and create some magic. So have you seen programs like that?
Well, there are several entrepreneurial communities in the United States, for tech. There's Silicon Valley, Seattle, New York, Boston, Austin, Texas, just to name a few. And each of them has a couple of societies like that. Whether it's a formal thing or informal thing, there's always get-togethers because it's a fluid environment. If you look at the resume of someone who works in Silicon Valley, these are people who have a new job every year or two. They constantly flip around from different places. because ventures get started, they launch, they fail, or they get acquired, and then people move on. So there's a need to network and and find your next team member, your next investor, your next partner. A lot of technology ventures form through partnerships. So, for example, let's say you develop a technology. It can be very helpful to become a partner of a major technology company, to become a Microsoft partner, an Oracle partner, an IBM partner. You sort of hitch your wagon to that major entity, and you give them value, and they can give you a lot of value. They give you credibility. You can get tapped into their customer base. They obviously want your customers to be on their platform. So what you find sometimes at these venture networking events is you'll see someone walking around from Microsoft or IBM or whatever, and you're like, well, why are you here? You guys haven't been a startup in 40 years. So they want to be in the startup business. They buy startups. They want to partner with startups. They want to go where the action is too. So there's other kinds of alliances. Another thing that happens a lot in technology startups is the use of standards and open source software, for example. So one thing that people sometimes don't understand about the software business is that a lot of really great software already exists in sort of raw form, and you can get it for free and adapt it for your purpose. So when you go to a venture event, often there's someone there from the Linux Foundation or one of these open source organizations, and they have a lot to offer you too. So if people get together, then you can start to meet people who can help turn your vision into reality.
Mm. So how do these companies like Google, Microsoft, Apple, some of these companies, how do they keep their ear to the ground to kind of see what's going on?
Well, they do it in a lot of different ways. Some really big tech companies actually run their own venture capital funds. They actually will invest themselves in new companies, but they have the way it works generally is, the mechanism is usually through industry events, industry publications. People constantly reading. There's certain blogs that people read, and they see what's hot. Like there's a blog called Venture Beat that talks about all the hot tech companies that are getting funded and what's happening. But usually what happens is, I'll just give you an example. So when I was at Microsoft, I was involved. I was a public relations lead on the acquisition of a company in Norway for $1 billion. It was called Fast Search. It was a search engine. And the person who was in charge, the person who decided that Microsoft needed to buy that company, was the product manager for the Microsoft product that was going to integrate it. The product manager realized that his product needed a better search engine than it currently had. So he went up the chain of command and said, and you have to imagine what this conversation would be like, right? You're like, I'd like Microsoft to buy this company. How much is it going to cost? $1.4 billion. Really? They were like, okay, go ahead. So it became that person's responsibility to buy that company. So it's an interesting process to see.
That's a number that's a very interesting number, $1.4 billion. Very interesting. Hold on a second, Hugh.
Yep.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Rick Young, another segment of What's in Your Hand at WHCR 90.3 FM. And we are talking to Hugh Taylor, who's the president of Taylor Communications. And we're talking about things like $1.4 billion, just the average, everyday conversation. Hugh, what does your ideal client look like, or ideal customer or client?
Well, most of my clients are in business-to-business technology, B2B technology. I don't really work with companies that are consumer-facing. Most of my clients are selling, big, expensive technology products to corporate clients, and it's an exciting marketplace. It's a little bit less volatile than consumer technology, which is one of the reasons I like it. It's a little more subdued, but it's a cool place to be, and I like to work with venture-backed companies that are in business to business, and I work with a lot of really big companies too. So, whatever they need, I can help them with mostly written communications.
And what's the most fun that you have doing the work that you do?
Well, I like the creative challenge. I get hired a lot to write articles and books for technology companies, so I've written some of the For Dummies books, and so I get approached, like when the Dummies books, like I wrote a book called Complex Event Processing for Dummies, or Master Data Management for Dummies, and these are really esoteric topics that only really geeky people care about. But with the Dummies book, the Dummies editors say, hey, it's the Dummies book, you got to make it funny. And I'm like, oh, yeah, of course. You say complex event processing. I'm just cracking up just hearing about it. What are you even talking about? So it's a creative challenge to make a topic that's basically kind of dull, interesting and exciting. Or a lot of what I do is to take a very obscure technology issue and make it relevant to a business manager. That's always a challenge. Like, how is this technology going to help my business? That's really the communication issue that people come to me for. And it's really similar if you're trying to raise money for a venture. You have to actually go through that thought process and explain to an investor, this is why a customer is going to want to buy this product. It's going to help the customer make more money, or it's going to help the customer save more money. So you have to go through the same thought process whether you're marketing the product or marketing the business venture for investors.
We broadcast on the campus of City College.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came in today, I saw a huge poster saying that they're doing a challenge. And basically what they want to do is for someone to come with an idea that could change the world. I was like, wow, that's kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
And when you hear something like that, like when you see something, I think there's like a $30,000 prize or something like that, which is, small change, but not bad.
Mm-hmm.
So an idea that will change the world. It's a social innovative challenge.
Mm-hmm.
When you hear that, Hugh, what becomes present for you?
Well, one thing that I've noticed, I have a strange hobby that my wife finds peculiar, but I like to read obituaries in the New York Times.
Wow.
And you can learn a lot about ideas that have changed the world by reading obituaries of the people who thought them up. And sometimes the ideas that change the world are not that big a deal when they come out, but they will change the world. Like, for example, the man who invented the shipping container died about a year ago. And he had what was really a pretty minor idea, but one that really changed the world, which is he figured out how to lock these big steel shipping containers together so they wouldn't tip off the boat. That idea led to a transformation of the way freight is moved around the world, and it really changed the whole world. It certainly changed New York City radically. If you go back 50 years in New York, the docks on the Hudson River were busy. Then all of a sudden they weren't because all the cargo started going to New Jersey, to the container port, right? Or another example, I don't know the gentleman's name, but who thought of this idea of having a hand-cranked electrical generator for a computer. So with that, you could take a laptop computer anywhere in the world, India, Africa, doesn't matter. You don't have to have electricity. You could crank it up and use it. And so these are ideas that change the world. They're relatively simple. I think that what we have today, the potential in technology, is to bring people together and to bring ideas together in ways that can change the world. And I'll give you an example of something of a service that I personally think is great, and can be a potential sort of on-ramp for people who are testing entrepreneurial ideas. And I'm no axe to grind. I have no vested interest in this, but I just want to share it with you. It's called Fiverr. It's called FIVERR.com. Right. Are you familiar with Fiverr?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yes.
So Fiverr is just absolutely brilliant. It's a service where you can advertise a gig. You'll do any service for $5.
Right.
And it's fun. So, you can, if you want to, like, say you can draw a logo or, do a voiceover or play a jingle or whatever it is you can do, you can charge $5 for it. But what's fascinating about it is it's bringing people together from all over the world.
Okay.
Meaning, like, I'm sitting here in Los Angeles. I can hire someone in, Indonesia for $5 to, do some project for me, to draw a logo in Magic Marker and, scan it on the computer for me. Whatever it is I want. So this actually is a potentially, like, world-changing idea because it could bring, income to poor parts of the world. It allows people to try out ideas. Okay, $5. What could go wrong?
Right, right.
Let's say you have a talent. Let's say you're good at drawing. You say, I want to be. My entrepreneurial idea is I want to start an art studio. Well, here's the way you could test it out. Let's see if someone will pay you $5. That's a really great test. You could get some feedback on your work. You could make a little bit of money. You could get some experience. I mean, and so what they did with Fiverr, it's sort of like it's kind of like a social network and an e-commerce platform in one, and it's fascinating, and and I think that ideas like this will bring change. Another example, and something that I'm getting involved in too, is the Google Helpouts. Google Helpouts are a new service on Google where you can basically do, like, personal tutoring or service through Google Chat to a paying customer. So, for example, let's say you're a yoga instructor. You could give a yoga class to somebody, anywhere else in the world through the webcam, and they could pay you, $2 a minute or whatever you want to charge. But it just opens up the whole economy in a way. It really enables, at the very least, people to make money doing things that they're good at without having the overhead of an office or whatever, or place of business. But it also provides this opportunity to test concepts. It has that business incubating function, if you want to use it that way. So these are new ideas that brings people together, brings buyers and sellers together in a kind of low risk way, and it's amazing.
Hugh, I want you to listen to this for a second. Tell me your opinion of this piece.
Mm-hmm. Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels, the troublemakers, the round pegs in the square holes, the ones who see things differently. They're not fond of rules, and they have no respect for the status quo. You can quote them, disagree with them, glorify or vilify them. About the only thing you can't do is ignore them, because they change things. They push the human race forward. While some may see them as the crazy ones, we see genius. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do.
WHCR 90.3 FM, New York.
Ladies and gentlemen, Rick Young, another segment of What's in Your Hand at WHCR 90.3 FM, the voice of Harlem. And I'm on the line with Hugh Taylor. I was gonna say Hugh Jackman, Hugh Taylor, entrepreneur, business expert. Hugh, what did you think of that piece by Steve Jobs?
Well, I think it's very inspiring, and it's basically true that you have to, if you want to make a difference, you have to think about things differently from everybody else. The only thing I'll add, like I was sort of alluding to before, the people who really can make stuff happen deliberately, who don't want to sort of accidentally change the world, is to be able to merge that thinking with the ability to execute on a plan, for example, or do things that are, different. They're different skill set from being a visionary. But what happens in entrepreneurship usually is there's usually sort of a transition. There's people who are really good at thinking up ideas and starting companies, And those people are often not the same people who know how to make a company grow, and they're almost always never the people who know how to run a really big company. So what you see in an entrepreneurial life cycle is sort of a series of handoffs. And I've been through these. I've seen them happen where there's, the visionary who starts a company, and then a year later they're having success. They bring in a new CEO, and the visionary becomes, the chief technology person or whatever, keeps their ownership stake, remains involved, but maybe steps away from management. And then what's interesting, too, as a company really grows, that venture CEO is replaced by someone who knows how to run, like a $100 million company. It's a totally different skill set. Managing 500 people in a big it's totally different, and you need more, like, discipline and maybe less of that creative zaniness. And sometimes, of course, you get, like, a Steve Jobs or someone who's like that misfit who also manages. But I do think that the fundamental idea of that commercial is true. Great success in technology usually comes from thinking about things a little bit differently. And I'll give you kind of a mild example, which is Facebook. The interesting thing about Facebook is Facebook was not the first social network, right? It wasn't even the 10th social network to launch. It came in fairly late in the game. I'm just contradicting my earlier comment about being late. But what Facebook did, whether deliberately or sort of through happenstance, it was much simpler and much more fun than anything else that had come before it, because I think that, this is just my impression, that Mark Zuckerberg had some intuitive idea about what a social network should feel like, and it just zoomed ahead of everybody else. Or if you look at Microsoft, if you have to go back almost 40 years now to the start of Microsoft, but Bill Gates his insight was that the future of the computer industry was based on software, not hardware. He had that insight that if you could control the software, you could control the industry, and that was completely different from what everybody thought up till then. Then it was, in the 1970s, it was, IBM, digital equipment, big companies selling what they call heavy iron, big computer systems. That was the core of the industry. And Bill Gates realized that the hardware was sort of a commodity. Anybody could make the hardware. The software would really control. And that was his idea, and that's what made him one of the richest men in the world.
Wow. Now, what do you see coming down the pike as far as, like, technology is concerned, business, small companies, startups, big companies? What do you see coming down the pike?
I think that this is not exactly an original thought, but I think it's very much true today as it was even a year or two ago, which is that the mobile technology, mobile computing, is really one of the main growth areas in technology. What that means is open to interpretation, and I was for a while very involved with a mobile advertising technology company, and what I was seeing there is that there's an enormous potential that has not been realized. That, for example, the way people interact with their mobile devices and the way people advertise on them, it's very early. It's very early in that market, and there's a lot of opportunity if people can come up with ways to make, mobile marketing, just as an example, more effective. There's a lot of money to be made there. But of course, it's a challenge. It's not a simple thing to figure out. But you can definitely see the need, meaning that people spend more time on their mobile devices now than they do on other technologies. In fact, people spend more time, especially younger people, spend more time with their phones and tablets than they spend watching TV, listening to radio, talking to other human beings, whatever it is that most people over the age of 30 actually did with their lives, right? So that's where they live. Or for example, this was the mobile technology. I'll give you an example of the way the market changes. Here in Los Angeles, there are a lot of people from Latin America. And a lot of the people from Latin America have a mobile phone. They do not necessarily have an email address. They may not even have a regular postal address. The mobile phone is basically where they live. You understand? So that's how you reach. If you can't reach that mobile phone, you can't reach that audience. And the current state of the art of reaching that Spanish-speaking audience in LA through mobile devices is totally primitive. There's a huge opportunity in that kind of thing, in that kind of technology. There's also opportunities. There's always opportunities in technology the things that will make life a little bit easier. I'll just give you one example. This is an idea I had. It may not be a good idea, but maybe it'll be a good experiment. Let me just throw out an idea. With the new healthcare law, the Obamacare law, it can be very difficult to understand whether an insurance plan will cover your medicine. It's one of these like mysteries. If someone could come up with some kind of database application or mobile app or computer or website that could tell you, this is the medicine I take, will this insurance plan cover that medicine? That's a need that hasn't been served. That's an information-intense business there waiting to be started. Things like that. Entrepreneurs need to look. You need to look at. Basically, my suggestion to tech entrepreneurs, if you don't have an idea, is figure out what's aggravating people in life. There's often a technology solution that will lessen that aggravation. If you can reduce people's aggravation, then you're going to be on your way to figuring out a workable idea.
Wait a second here. You telling me to go and look for a problem?
Yes.
And that problem will make me rich? Wow. Most people, when they see problems, they run the other way.
Well, it's somebody's problem to solve, you know.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. That is really cool. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the president of Taylor Communications, Hugh Taylor. So what do you plan? What's on the agenda for you this coming year, 2014? Well,
I've written a book called The Life Reset, which is about how to rethink your career and overcome setbacks in work and life, and it talks a lot about how to figure out what you're good at and what you're meant to be doing in life. And so I'm really encouraging people to check out Life Reset. I'm promoting that.
Let me have your website.
It's liferesetsite.com, liferesetsite.com. And this year I'm also I'm doing a lot of business development, working with. I just signed up some new clients this month actually, and I'll tell you an interesting story. This month, for the first time ever, I got a new client through LinkedIn.
Wow.
Now, LinkedIn, I've been involved in LinkedIn for a long time, and I've always found it a very good service, but it was always kind of like what you might call a nice-to-have, not a have-to-have kind of thing in your life. You know,
okay.
Like, everybody's got LinkedIn, okay. But one of my pieces of advice to entrepreneurs that I try to follow myself is always be open to learning new things. So I saw an email that said, learn how to market yourself on LinkedIn. I'm like, okay. And so it was free. I just read it. It was an article. I read it, and I followed the advice in the article. And what it said was something that I hadn't thought about, which is LinkedIn is basically a search engine. If you can make yourself easier to find on LinkedIn, people might hire you. So I followed the directions, and it took a while, but sure, I've now gotten a client, like a paying client, who just reached out to me through LinkedIn saying, hey, maybe you're the kind of person we want to work with. I'm like, okay. So it just shows, like, you never know, like, trying new things, trying to improve your marketing game always helps.
Okay. Well, speaking of improving your marketing, how, you know, with the work that I'm doing, you heard me mention about this event that I'm doing the work with the radio here. I'm interviewing all of these different people. How do I connect with a Google or a Facebook or a company like that? Are they interested in working with someone like myself?
I would imagine. I mean, one of the biggest problems that tech companies have is hiring good people. And I think they're always interested in tapping into community resources or social networks of people who are interested in technology. You know, Google has a big presence in New York where Google's one of the most powerful companies in the advertising industry, and New York's the advertising capital of the world. So, they're very much on the ground. I don't know who you talk to over there, but like I would imagine that they'd be quite interested. They might want to recruit at an event like this, or just sort of establish some kind of connection. And you have an advantage being on the radio. See, one thing that's funny in the current era of sort of internet and mobile technology craziness is that people forget how incredibly powerful the radio is.
Right.
You've got already one of the best marketing tools on your side. People have a personal connection with the radio. It's part of their life. It's a very powerful medium. So you're already sitting in a good seat But I think if you want to bring sponsors in or whatever, I think you'll find interest from some of the major tech players in the New York area.
All right, that's good. Give me your website one more time.
Okay.
Hugh?
Yeah, liferesetsite.com.
All right. Wow. Hugh, this was very enlightening conversation. It was a very enlightening conversation. I learned a lot. I'm sure my listeners learned a lot. Very technical, but hey, you got to learn it.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you. I really appreciate you today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And let's keep in contact, and maybe I could help you down the road.
Very good. I look forward to that.
All right. Thank you, and have a spectacular day.
All right. Thanks.
All right. Take care. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Hugh Taylor sharing some very interesting insights on business technology and starting up a business and business-to-business connections. Very important. Well, the next voice that you're going to hear would be Dalton Anderson. And that's going to be a great show. Looking for a great show from Dalton. And June 29th is the date. That is the date. June 29th. Sunday, June 29th. And I will see you then. And I'll be back Friday. I'm here Friday and Sunday from 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. Another segment of What's in Your Hand. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I will see you next Friday.
Vacuum, you are now in a position to receive. See, if I have my arms closed holding on to everything I've got, nothing is available to come in. But if I'm open, if I created a vacuum there by giving and keeping the flow going, the stuff in the universe is going to come back to me, ladies and gentlemen. It's going to come back. Whatever you give. Whenever I go into a room and give a speech to inspire people, to help them to develop their greatness, if you get 10% of what I get, because as Bach says, we teach that which we need most. I'm not wearing any crown. I need it as much as I'm sharing it. I'm still growing. I'm still unfolding. I'm still seeking to discover my greatness. And if you get 10% of what I get when I walk out of here, see, there will be a different man walking out of here than who came in here. And as I give, and the more I give to you, the more I get. Most people don't understand that. That's a law of life. Do you know that we can literally eliminate poverty overnight? We can eliminate hunger and homelessness overnight if people understood the concept.
Welcome, folks. This is your host, Seishu at Tiffincast, and today we're speaking with entrepreneur, author, and Jets fan, Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary, thanks for joining us today.
It's a real pleasure to be with you, Session. Thank you so much.
I'm excited to have you back here. I know it's been about a year or so since we last talked, when your book Thank You Economy came out, and you're one of the authors. I'll tell you right off the bat. I've read both your books cover to cover without stopping.
Thank you so much.
I'm not just flattering you. I'm just telling you the truth, and I'm not the only one, my friend. I've talked to people all the way in New Zealand who have read your books and have said, man, this guy is phenomenal. So let's dive right into how you got yourself where you got yourself. Okay, we all know you got your start as a wine distributor. You've got a phenomenal following thanks to a video show that you started. What really motivated you to start the video show? Like, what told you, like, okay, this is going to be the way I'm going to reach my audience?
So I'm a classic immigrant story, right? Born in the former Soviet Union, came to America, and got involved in a family business. And I innovated in the wine business. And then the reason I decided to go to a show, did I chop up again?
You did a little bit, but that's okay. You're back.
I'm going to keep an eye on it. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
The reason I decided to, it's chopping. Hold on, I got to figure out what's going on here to see if there's a hard wire, because this chopping must be a bandwidth thing. Give me a second.
Sure, absolutely.
Nate, it's chopping a little bit. wonder if it's that office. I don't think it's location-based Wi-Fi. Is anybody is anybody downloading movies or anything like that?
Fox might be streaming something for the episode that they're live seeing.
Can you find out if they are or aren't?
Your computer's legit frozen.
So like, yeah. Sorry about this, my friend.
No problem. No problem at all.
Are they? Can they turn it off or no? They're CMing, right? So they're streaming, right?
Yeah. Was that down 15? But the thing is that honestly, that shouldn't. For what? I don't know what we're paying.
I don't know.
I'm doing it.
I know. I agree. All right. Let me just move location. I don't know. Let me just let me do it here. See what happens. See if we can get.
So far, you haven't cut out, so...
Yeah, I noticed, so I'm going to try to keep going. Okay.
WHCR 90.3
So basically, I'm
FM,
a
New York.
Story, grew up in a family liquor store business, fell in love with the wine world, then launched WineLibrary.com in 1996, early, innovated, but the wine show happened...
Let's go to church! Let's go to church!
It's Morning Praise with Dalton Anderson. Sunday mornings, 8 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Listen and enjoy the best in contemporary, traditional, quartet, gospel comedy, holy hip-hop, and gospel house music with the man who knows how to wake and bake and shake you right out your gospel beds. It's Morning Praise with Dalton Anderson. Sunday mornings, 8 a.m. on WHCR 90.3 FM. Let's go to church. Come on.
Good morning. I am Sister Glossary Holmes, asking you to stay close to WHCR 90.3 FM in New York. On the Sweet Spirit of Victory program, Sister Mary Jefferson and I, Sister Glossary Holmes, are on from 4 a.m.